midget at the circus. But let's go into this week. Around the grounds culminated this afternoon with Forest just once again just ticking along, beating Wolves 3-0. Really good performance by them. I think it was goals by Gibbs, White. I'm not sure who got the third. I know Wood got one. Oh, I think the former Liverpool striker got one in stoppage time as well. Forrest just keeps clicking along. Another clean sheet. Obviously, Man City bounces back, but is it a bounce back if you beat Julian Lopetegui in West Ham, which I'm not sure if he's actually officially been sacked yet, but I did see earlier today that all indications were he was getting the sack. I'm going to ask you about the manager replacement in a moment here. And then the two big ones, I think, are both Chelsea and Arsenal both dropping points. Newcastle picking up a big 3 points at Spurs to really solidify their claim at a top 4 or 5 place. I think 5 on the bounce right now. Newcastle is making a run, trying to make your prediction of top 4 look really, really good, Paul. So what was the biggest result of the weekend? What was the biggest surprise for you in whichever order you want to tackle?
I honestly think the biggest result of the weekend, I think you can make an argument for Newcastle. I personally think the biggest result in terms of what it means to that club and what it should mean to potentially the season is the United draw with Liverpool. Just because I think they needed desperately something so positive to hang on to, that coming to Anfield and getting a point and walking away, they've got to feel pretty good about that. When they were pretty banged up, beat up from a morale standpoint coming in. I do think the Newcastle one's a big one, just because that Tottenham team and Newcastle, those are sort of, I'd put Tottenham, Newcastle, Chelsea, Aston Villa in the same sort of group of teams that are fringe teams looking to permanently settle in the top 4. And so I think and I said this last week or probably 2 weeks ago when I was on, I really think that Newcastle's put this thing together just because they have right now between Joel Linton, Giménez, and Tonali, they have the perfect balance in midfield right now. And I think that has really kind of put them at the next level right now. When Isak is healthy and he's got that midfield behind him, they score goals. And so I think it's good. I think the other one that kind of stands out there for me is obviously this is a league where the bottom is so bad and that there's so much parity in the middle of the table that a team like Chelsea should be rolling points. And so to draw late to Palace is just not a great look for them when they seem to have kind of figured a lot of this out.
Yeah, I think Chelsea's kind of regressed back to the mean, and I think that's kind of where they're probably going to end up. I think they're going to be 3rd, 4th fighting with the Newcastles, eventually maybe City if they go on some type of a substantiated run, if they make a good purchase in January or 2. I saw the way that whole thing transpired and unfolded for the weekend, some really interesting things. It's funny you say that. During the watch along we did during Goal Rush, I asked Matoush that. I said, I think you could argue that at times Gravenberch, Szoboszlai, and McAllister have been the most powerful and balanced midfield and at their highest operatic note. But on paper, if you just take Tonali, Giménez, and Joelinton, the power that they have as 3 players together, dribbling, driving forward, making a tackle, sticking in. I mean, it just amazes me that Joelinton was a number 9 flop and Eddie Howe turned him into one of the best 8s in the Premier League. It's the weirdest and most strangest revelation.
He doesn't even look like he's built for it. You know what I mean?
No,
it's so.
No, but it's just something about how they all work together. Tonali, I think my comment was, I guess if you were asking me the better overall midfield, I might probably give the slight edge to Liverpool, and it's purely because I think you have to figure in that you have Harvey Elliott's and Curtis Jones's to rotate in with them.
Yeah.
And, even though Sean Longstaff has turned into a much better footballer than I actually thought he would be, he's not as good as these backups, and they don't have a fifth one that they can really do. So I think they could really use it. The PSR rules are bullshit, and it led to them being forced to sell Elliot Anderson, or they would have probably the best midfield, because I think Anderson would have actually pushed Tonali, if not started over him. He's a big reason why Forest has done so well. And now there's big clubs talking about being interested in Anderson because of what he's shown so far this season at Forest. For me, one of the matches that I thought was really intriguing and interesting, even though it turned out to be kind of controversial, was the Fulham Ipswich. Obviously, Fulham's a side that's been in good form this season. Ipswich has gotten so many draws. I saw a crazy stat. Ipswich has dropped 18 points in the final 15 minutes of matches and 19 points from winning position. So like they've had leads in almost every match they scored in this year. If they just had a little bit more investment in the summertime, I honestly believe they could have been one of these like Wolves type sides that comes up and in their first year finishes like 14 to 12, picks up a bunch of cash, gets the experience, and then builds on it and creates a substantial run. And instead, it's unfortunate. I feel like they're probably going to be the side that finishes in 18th and be like a point or two away from staying up. What is it about Ipswich that continues to make them concede late? Is it the young defense? Is it the fact that McKenna hasn't changed? He's not Russell Martin kamikaze, but he's not exactly pragmatic either, even when they get a lead. What does Ipswich need to do to formulate enough to stay up for this season?
Obviously they're working with limited tools, but like to me, like when you have a team that drops points like that from like that many points from those positions consistently, like to me that's on the manager, right? Because like either A, you've allowed a mindset and a culture to like permeate the team. We weren't that far removed from a Liverpool side that did that. Like, remember the tail end of Brendan Rodgers' career, like at Liverpool, where like it seemed like we were just dropping games left and right, like after having leads in the second half. I also put that on the manager to make tactical decisions that shore up your back line and make you more conservative as the match progresses. And I think sometimes Ipswich, what I like about Ipswich, which is kind of their Achilles heel late in games, where they're just so open and they just stay open. You know what I mean? Like that door never closes.
So let's take a look at the bottom of the table here, talking about Ipswich. Southampton just does what they do and drops just embarrassing performances. The new manager bounce has not bounced. Neither has it at Leicester with 5 losses in a row. You're welcome, Rude. And then, of course, Ipswich with their obligatory draw do have a couple of victories, and Wolves lost today, starting to figure it out a bit, but still just right there on points. And then, of course, the inevitable non-scorable Everton. So are we in agreement at this point, Paul, that Palace has probably turned the corner and everyone from Palace above is pretty safe from getting sucked into this thing? Maybe purely to how poor the bottom 5 teams are.
I think so. I think you gotta keep half eye on West Ham here, right? I mean, they continue to just not look great. At the end of the day, they probably got enough there. The other thing that you're looking at here, yeah, like Palace down below, but like for me, Ipswich and Wolves have sort of been like stride for stride right now. But I think the main difference here is that Wolves obviously can score goals, right? And we always say towards the bottom of the table, whoever scores the most goals usually finds their way out of this situation. So you're probably giving yourself the edge to the Wolves. But on the flip side of that, we have an Everton team that scored, like 15 goals in 19 matches. And so if that's their reality, that does not bode well for a relegation battle. And if you're in 16th, I think you got to be a little bit worried about that.
Yeah, I mean, it blows my mind that they've only scored 15 goals. It really does. Now, I did think the last couple of matches, the attacks looked a little better because they began to start the Chelsea Loney Broha, the Albanian international. but he gets injured, of course, in the 30th minute and has to come off. And with that means you have to bring on Calvert-Lewin, which basically means you're not going to score. So I do think Everton might get sucked in there. They're Everton, so they're like the turd that won't get flushed. Sean Dyche will figure out a way. And again, we've said it before. I think they have the manager who is most equipped to fight for 4, 5, 6 months because he did it for an entire career at Burnley, right? I still think the end of the day, the three teams at the bottom are so bad that they'll find their way going down. But keep your eye on Wolves. If they are dumb enough to sell Cunha in January, there is a legitimate shot that they could go down by the end of the season. And if that happens, I won't be upset because, well, I picked them as one of my relegation teams. Looking at the top side of the table, Nottingham Forest sitting in third place, team you picked to get relegated.
I knew that was going to be your transition, you dick. That was a good one. Nice.
It was good. But to be fair to you, you made a huge mistake with Forest and Nuno getting fired first, but you did say that City would finish fourth in the league, and that probably looks like it's probably going to be right around where they are right now, if not even higher. It will not shock me at all if Liverpool goes on and wins this league by a comfortable margin, not even one to the size they have now. But it also wouldn't shock me if City goes on a run and they finish second in this stupid thing and they lose by like 8 points. And everyone's like, oh, remember when they were 22 points off of first and not going to finish in the top 4? And then Pep rattles off 15 in a row. Looking at this top side, if one of Bournemouth, Villa, or Fulham have a chance to break into this top 5, 6, 7, which side do you think it is and why?
Oh man, if you would have asked me preseason, I would have said Villa. If you're asking me now, I'd probably say Fulham, but like I'm probably 60-40 Fulham Villa, like if that makes sense. Just because Fulham shows flashes of like brilliance, just straight up brilliance in the way they play. And they can do some really nice things offensively. They've got a lot of dangerous pieces, but then they also do stuff like this past weekend in drawing matches that they probably have no business drawing in if they want to take the next step.
That's kind of where I think that's why I actually lean towards Bournemouth. I think Bournemouth has the most I think Bournemouth plays the best football on the eye. I think Bournemouth has the best collection of young talent. I think they may have the best collection of young talent under 25 in the entire Premier League. Like, it's a pretty special side top to bottom when you look at the kids they have. I think they'll have more players playing in top sides across Europe in the next 10 years or 5 years than any of those other teams.
Battle of the South Coast teams. You would put their roster and their style of play above Brighton right now?
I would, because I think that Bournemouth actually has the one. As much as I love João Pedro, I think João Pedro is one of those guys that needs to go to a big club and not be the number 9 and play off of someone or play as like a false 9. I think they ask him to be their number 9, and it just doesn't work. And him and Ferguson don't work. I also think that there's something broken about the Minta, Matoma, Adinga. I think Ferdy's really good. I don't think it works right now. And I also think Bournemouth's defenders between Kirkes, Zabanyarny, the Hoysen, or whatever the kid's name is, the 19-year-old Spanish kid that Madrid's now interested in. I just think there's something about that Bournemouth team. And I still think like Semenyo, Evangelson, I just think Kluivert, they have a very deep side. And then you see a kid like David Brooks getting an opportunity to play and score that wonderful volley against Everton. Couldn't happen to a better kid who's endured more and deserved it. He was an up-and-coming talent before the cancer and then the Achilles injury. So I think it's something about him. I also think, and I've said this before, I genuinely believe if Pep walks, they'll look at a manager like Iriola to be the type of manager to take over. I think someone that plays an expansive style of football. I think he just plays a brand. And it's so funny because we were all like, they did Gary O'Neill dirty, hiring this foreign guy with no experience. And then he starts the season like 0-6, playing like Ange. And he's like, I ain't changing my principles. This is how I play. And then since I think last December, they've secured the third most amount of points in the entire Premier League outside of Man City and Arsenal. That's an amazing stat.